Welcome to Reddit Aliens. Serious. When you were in school, did a classmate pass away? If so, what happened? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Kindergarten. A girl died of a cardiac event sitting at her desk. She wasn't in my class, but we were in the same grade. 5th grade, during summer break, a girl died of an aneurysm while on a trip with her family. 6th grade. A girl was killed when a train hit her babysitter's car. I can still hear the screeching of the car being dragged down the tracks. 10th grade. A boy died in a solo motorcycle accident. 11th grade. A boy committed suicide. I went to school with a Make-A-Wish receiver who passed just before his 18th birthday. His wish was to finish a 51 Ford him and his dad were restoring. A local car club took on the project and it was finished months before his death. The car was kept by the family and driven around on nice days for years after he passed. I also went to school with a kid who crushed himself under a car when it fell off the blocks he had sitting on. My high school principal also dropped dead on campus one morning about 25 minutes before school started. I was friends with this girl since primary school. She came to my school in grade 3 and became my friend ever since. We then went to high school together and had a few classes together. She passed away in year 10. To this day, I'm not entirely sure how, as some of the popular girls used my friend's death to become more popular, posts on social media, when really they weren't very nice to her at all and only knew her for a short period of time. It made me feel like I wasn't allowed to mourn my friend's death because I wasn't deemed close enough. One girl at school said to another girl, "Why are you crying? You hardly knew her," which was really rude. It was a shitty time. She was a gorgeous person, and I have lovely memories with her. A girl at my school with no previous health issues literally just dropped dead while playing volleyball with her classmates. She was 11, I think. Apparently her heart just stopped. It was so weird going to school after it happened. The atmosphere was very different. When I was in high school, my close friend and classmate Anthony passed away at the age of 17 after pretty much a lifelong battle with bone, brain, and lung cancer. His death really impacted me and the entire school. He was really a positive force on people, always had a positive attitude and a smile on his face. I have no idea how he did it, honestly. I'm still not sure how one human being could endure and overcome so much pain and suffering and still be so happy and nice. I don't think this kid ever had one bad day, or had a bad attitude, or said one nasty remark, at least not that anyone saw. And even though he had so many health problems of his own, he always listened to people vent about their obviously much more trivial problems and would tell you that you were strong and that you would get through it. I was dating Anthony's best friend John at the time of his passing, and I remember us being in the hospital visiting Anthony one last time right before he passed away. He was on life support, and it was just awful to see such a close friend that way. His funeral was such a surreal and scary experience. It was my first experience with the death of someone my age. Thousands of people showed up to the funeral, to the point that we couldn't all fit inside the church. Groups of people were spilling out onto the parking lot and the streets. Pretty much the whole town showed up. It was so packed that the funeral procession required police escorts, and they had to shut down Main Street and all. We were all so impacted by his death that the school brought in special grief counselors for the students to visit with. I really miss him and think about him all the time, even all these years later, and I really wish he was still alive today. He passed so young, and there was still so many things all his friends wanted to experience with him. So in my 6th grade class, one kid had a very severe peanut allergy. What happened was he was on a family vacation and was out at a restaurant eating dinner. His sister apparently shared a bite of her shrimp dish with him, and unbeknownst to her, the shrimp had been cooked with peanut oil. The reaction was so fast and severe, he passed before any help could arrive. Very tragic. Imagine being his sister. A guy I was becoming friends with committed suicide while I was in high school. I distinctly remember passing the football around with him in gym class the day before winter break and saying, "Have a good break, see you next year." He committed suicide over the break. I had no idea about anything he was going through. It was the first funeral I went to where the person was my age. Just a surreal experience. Final year of engineering school, we had to take a class that was a prerequisite for senior design. You needed to pass this class, or you'd have to retake and graduate late. Well, that professor decided to have the harshest grading system as a way of putting the students in their place. The entire class was group projects, and when we got back our first project grade, they ranged from around 5 out of 100 to 40 out of 100. Fast forward to after the second project, where the grades are even worse than the first. The next class, after receiving our project grades, a student health advisor came into the room to let us know one of our classmates had committed suicide. I couldn't help but feel it was the professor's fault for sending this kid into a spiral, thinking he will fail his degree due to his absurd grading scale. At the end of the semester, the professor would curve everyone up to a C+ average, but didn't even mention it during the class or syllabus. Felt terrible for the kid and hated the professor for it. The sister of a girl in my class died of an asthma attack on Mother's Day. The entire school got called to the assembly and was told about it. I think she was only 10 or 11, and her sister must have been about 8 or 9. It was incredibly sad. I remember walking past where her class would keep their PE bags and seeing hers still there. It was probably the coldest part of the school. A friend in high school. We were in drama club together. He came out to me since he knew I was gay. We shared his first kiss, his first sexual experience together. His parents were loving but very religious, and he was trying to build up the courage to tell them. While swimming in a pond, a log underwater rolled on top of him and he drowned. His family was devastated. What made it sad was that they never knew who their son really was. He never got to tell them. I don't know, maybe it was better that they kept their idealized memory of him. It certainly was not my place to tell them. It just hurts to know that part of him will always be a secret from the people who loved him most. In year 11, right before GCSEs began, my friend passed away. He was driving home from seeing friends with 2 passengers, and a drunk driver hit him head-on. He passed away in the ambulance, and his friend in the vehicle had some major injuries but recovered. It happened at, I think, 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. I received a phone call letting me know what had happened and that I needed to let another friend who had been kind of seeing him. That was the hardest thing I ever had to do to this day. We stayed up all night talking and being there for each other, reminiscing and crying and comforting each other. Then the next day, we decided we would go to school. We see each other and everyone else and just sort of figure it out together. When we get to school, everyone was crying. He was well loved, funny, charming, kind, and everyone in the school felt his loss and mourned together for a long, long time. Being so young and figuring out how to navigate grief when so many hadn't experienced it before was awful, but we had each other. Losing him was the hardest thing. I still think about him all the time and actually named my son after him. This school year, October 2021, a boy a year younger than me passed away. We still don't know much about the reason why, but we know that he fell from a very high wall and smashed his head on the ground. Most of his friends thinks it's suicide, but the police think it was an accident. We still don't know, and I don't think we ever will. I didn't know him personally, but his death shook the whole school. I went to elementary school with a kid who was in the same grade as me, but we were never in the same class. He and his entire family, himself, his parents, his younger brother, and his older brother, were murdered by 2 guys that were associated with the father via drug connections. The 2 guys brutally murdered the family and set the house on fire. Never knew the kid who was in the same grade as me, so I had no idea how to react to the whole situation. My school's yearbook that year had a page or 2 dedicated to the kid and his younger brother. When I was in high school, there was a kid who had leukemia. He was going through chemo, so he lost all his hair. His skin was very pale, and he just looked weak. He was a little reserved, but still a nice kid, even though we didn't really interact much. Then one day, he was just gone. Our deputy headmaster was the biggest, scariest hard-ass you'll ever meet, and during an assembly, he gave the news that the kid had passed away. He broke down in tears midway through and barely finished what he had to say. I was too young to really process it, and I wasn't really friends with him, but now that I'm older, it makes me really sad that a boy that young had to go. In primary school, a kid called Jason died of a brain tumor, too young to really understand and appreciate it, but the school built a memorial garden that still stands to this day, 30 or so years later. Also went to his funeral. So weird to think that I've had a whole 3 decades of life, and somebody who was the same age as me didn't get to experience all of that. I actually thought about this fairly recently. Last year, Jesus Christ, can I really say that already? We lost our daughter at 35 weeks. It's strange to think that it made me think back to that garden and to the grief those parents must have felt, while at the time, it was just one of those, oh, can I go outside and play now moments when you're told as a kid. Sad. Yes, when I was in high school, a girl a year ahead of me committed suicide. She did not have many friends, so while people were obviously not happy about it, I don't remember anyone being personally upset. The next year, 2 boys in my year drowned in a boating accident. I didn't know them personally. There were thousands of students at the school, 500 in my class alone, but many were understandably upset about it. The one that really affected everyone in the school was the next year. I was a junior. 2 senior boys left campus during a lunch hour, which we weren't supposed to do, and got in a car accident on a dangerous curve in the road right in front of our school. They were simply going too fast, and the car overturned and went into a ditch. Nobody found them for a few minutes, since people weren't typically coming and going at that time of day. But then one of the school receptionists drove by and noticed. She found that one was already dead, and she held the other in her arms as he died. The boys were extremely popular, star athletes, and also about to go to great colleges. It was only a couple of months until graduation. There was a large memorial assembly, lots of grief counselors, lots of crying people. I think it was made worse that it happened right in front of our school, and only a few months after the boating accident. The receptionist was apparently really effed up by the experience. Yeah. Had this one dude in my year level that no one really liked. Me and my group of friends decided to take him in, except this one girl in my group. She used to do mean things to him, like call him smelly, which was true, but that's just mean to make fun of him in front of people. And like steal his seat every time he went to sit down where we sat to eat lunch, etc. So one day this kid didn't come to school. The people in our group that liked him thought he was sick or just stayed home, until he didn't come to school for the next week. I thought I'd visit him at home to see if he was okay. When I showed up at his house, there was police and ambulances out the front of his place. Turns out he killed himself the night before, and his parents found him in his room with his wrists slit. There was no evidence or note left that told why he did it, but the rest of us knew it was the girl in our group. 5 years later, I still visit his grave every so often and leave flowers. In 8th grade, a daredevil-type boy who loved fireworks, snakes, climbing huge trees, exploring abandoned buildings, fell through thin ice crossing a lake one day after school. A witness tried to help, but had to retreat and call for help. It took the police and fire department a long time to locate and recover his body. A day or 2 later, thin ice warning signs went up around the lake, and a police officer spoke at a school assembly about the dangers of thin ice. My family and I went to the boy's wake, and it was very hard to see his parents so devastated.